really sticks with me. When you invest in people, you cannot go wrong. You cannot go wrong. You see, that's what our scripture this morning is trying to tell us. The scripture, although he's talking about talents, which is back then referred to the money, but that's not the parable that Jesus is trying to teach us today. He's trying to teach us about investing in people. Investing in each other. For when we invest in each other, we can't go wrong. You see, when we invest in people, we can see a return on our investment. No matter how slight it is, we can see a return on our investment. But if we hold on to it and we don't invest in people, then we will not see a return on our investment. And we're going to be like the one who went and buried the talent and was scorned for it. You see, we've been all given talents, and it's not something that we need to waste. One of my favorite movies is Hoosiers. Has anybody seen Hoosiers? The one with Gene Hackman and about the basketball team from Hickory, Indiana. Love the movie. It tells the story of a small town Indiana high school basketball team that wins a state championship. Now, back then it was all schools together, not 3A, 4A, 5A, 6A schools all battling each other. It was all high schools together. Anyway, this team won the state championship. One important character, which is an alcoholic named Shooter. It was played by Dennis Hopper, great actor. He failed at most things in his life, but he has an extraordinary knowledge and passion for the game of basketball. And the coach, which is played by Gene Hackman, works with Shooter to give him a second chance in life. He asked Shooter to be his assistant coach. And soon Shooter is on the bench. Well, the little-known Hickory High School basketball team started to experience a lot of their winning ways, when during a pivotal game, the coach decides to get himself thrown out of the ball game. He pulls the referee aside and says, "Take me out of the game. Toss me out. Throw me out of the game." The ref doesn't know what the coach is talking about, but he gives in, tosses him out of the game. And Shooter's terrified, because when the coach is tossed, who has to take over? The assistant. But what you don't know is a few scenes earlier, after another drinking binge Shooter has been on, he promised the coach he'd stay sober as long and remain as the assistant coach on one condition. "You've got to give me your word," he says, "that you will not be kicked out of no games." I'm quoting that directly as any games, but anyway. The end of the game's near, the score's tied, the Hickory players call a timeout, the team huddle, all eyes are on Shooter. He's terrified. He's scared. His son is right there with him as well, one of the players, who never thought his dad should be in a position in the first place. Didn't like him being the assistant coach. And Shooter's paralyzed by fear. He can't speak, and finally his son says, "You reckon number 4 is going to put up the last shot, Dad?" And at that time, that seemed to jumpstart Shooter and says, "Yes." He says, "Yes," and he calls a play to defend against it. And the team goes back out on the floor, begins to execute it. They defend against it, and he calls timeout again. And Shooter calls all the team in. And now he's back completely engaged in the game. His knowledge and his passion for basketball have overtaken his fear. And he lays out the strategy for the next play with confidence. He said, "All right, now listen to me. This is the last shot we got. All right? We're going to run the picket fence at him." He says, "We're going to, Merle," he says, "you're the swingman. Jimmy, you're solo, right? All right, Merle should be open. Swing gate around the end of the fence. And now, boys, don't get caught watching the paint dry." And the players are all with him. They walk back out on the floor. They run the play to perfection. And they sink the game-winning bucket. Of course, Shooter and the players are deliriously happy. Amid the celebration, Shooter's son looks his father's eyes and says, "You did good, Pop. You did real good." A weak, shame-filled alcoholic did real good because the coach decided he was worth investing in. He was worth taking the risk on. Same way, God sees our value our value, and He loves us enough to invest in you and I. You see, we're called by God as Christians to invest in the lives of others. We're not called to be content. We sometimes have to take a risk when we invest in others, don't we? We don't know if we're really going to see that investment pay off. My question this morning is, has anybody ever invested in you? Has anybody ever invested in you? In my case, yes. Somebody invested in me. Did you pay a dividend on that investment they made in you? You see, investing in others is a risk worth taking. Do you know someone who needs to be the recipient of your investment? Do you know someone who needs you? Do you know someone in need of our investment as a church? You see, the kingdom of heaven is worth a risky investment, I believe. We're not supposed to sit back content and say, okay, we've got it, we're all right. That's not what Jesus calls us to do. He calls us to reach out, take bold and risky investments in people. And you do so in faith. It's worth the risky investment. Anybody is worth an investment. I think about a single mother who's struggling to make ends meet. Is that a person worth an investment of us? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think of a family who's lost their jobs. We all experienced that here a couple weeks ago. Are they worth our investment? Absolutely. I think of a friend of mine this last week who pretty much lost everything they owned in a fire at their house and have nowhere else to turn. Is that worth an investment from us? I think of a family whose kids are not being raised to know Jesus and is in need of learning. Is that worth an investment from us? I could go on and on about the different type of people that we need to invest. I think about a college ministry that sits on the campus of East Central University to help keep people close to God and keep these college students engaged with Christ. You see, you all made that investment. We received an award for it this last week at annual conference. Those students are worth the investment we make. When we take them a meal, when we give the ministry money, we could go on and on. We heard from Anna Sikora, who is the administrator for Lydia Patterson Institute. Something we give annually to above and beyond what we're called to do. I can't remember exactly how many students they had. I think it was 18, somewhere between 20 and 30 students this year who are graduating from high school who did not have a chance. But because Lydia Patterson Institute is there, they have the chance. They're graduating high school, and all but one is going to college. A couple at OCU. You see, we're making investments in people there. We might be giving our resources, our money, but we're making investments in people. And that is worth every dime. Every dime. I think about the ministry Jesus talked about, and we see in stories in our Bibles day after day about Him healing the sick, about Him ministering to people. It wasn't about the money. It was about the investment in people. Jesus set the example about investing. And He do anything to invest in a person. He invested his time in a people. And we should be as bold as to do the same. Because that's what we're called to do. Because somebody first invested in us.